Welcome to Sam's Russian Adventures. I'm Sam, an Englishman who's been living in Russia in the city of Vladimir for over 20 years. And in today's video, I'm going to walk around this neighborhood, and also we're going to talk about etiquette in Russia. Now, this is something that you're probably going to learn either from me or by making mistakes. And I've made loads of mistakes during my time here. And so I'm going to share my experience with you so that you're not going to make the same mistakes that I did. So we're right next to the dual carriageway, and they've got these big things here to kind of stop all the sound from reaching the houses. I always find it interesting where different people live. There's no way in the world I could live here on this road right next to this dual carriageway with that noise going on. It'd kill me. Do you fancy a house next to the dual carriageway? And here are the post boxes. Look, we've got 62 houses here on this road. Oh wow, we've got some like fur hanging up. Check out the colourful fence. We've got a mini castle here. I love these trees. In every country you've got your own etiquette and rules of how you should behave towards each other, the types of words that you should use to address each other, the way that you greet each other, and Russia is no different. One of the things that we have in Russia, of course, is we have two ways of speaking to somebody depending on whether you know that person or not. Now, also, you might know that person, but if that person is somebody you know, but they're perhaps a person like a teacher or a grandma of your friend or something like that, that you have to perhaps be more respectful when you speak to them, well, there's a way of greeting those people and speaking to those people, and then there's ways of speaking to your friends, and then there's other ways of speaking even friendlier to people. Russian private households seem to collect tires, whether it be to make a border, or whether that's to make a flower pot or whatever. They seem to love the tires. So another thing that Russian people have that is different to most European countries is that they use their father's name as part of their name. Typically in most Western countries we have different names that the parents will choose when you're born. So you'll have your first name, your surname, and then you'll have perhaps the name of your, I don't know, father's best football player, or a biblical name, or the name of somebody that they miss or they respected in their lives. In Russia, you don't have random middle names. You'll have your first name, you have the surname, and then you take your father's name, which I think is your patronymic name. And so, for example, if your name was Dimitri and your surname was, I don't know, let's just say Highland, for my surname is Highland, right? So your name would be Dimitri, and then you take your father's name, and let's say your father was Nikolai, so your name would be Dmitry Nikolaevich Highland. Now, it changes a little bit if it's for a woman. So the woman also takes her father's name, but let's say that, for example, the Russian woman is, I don't know, let's say Nina, okay? So her name would be Nina Highland, and her father's name would be Nikolaevna. Interesting, right? So here's a quick edit. The reason that the names end differently in Russian is because we have feminine and masculine names. And so feminine names end in a or ya. So for example, a man's name could be Sergei Nikolaevich Anisimov. A woman would be Nina Nikolaevna Anisimova. Who can guess the word that it says up here? Now, let's say that you know that the lady, I don't know, working in the police station that you need to go and see, or in the immigration department, is called Nina Nikolaevna Highland. What are you going to say when you go and speak to her? If you were in the UK or in most of Western Europe, you'd say her first name and her surname. So you'd say Nina Highland. So when you're searching or speaking to Nina Nikolaevna Highland, you'll simply call her Nina Nikolaevna. You'll maybe go up to someone and say, excuse me, is Nina Nikolaevna working today? Or excuse me, Nina Nikolaevna, can I speak to you? You wouldn't speak about her surname, you wouldn't even mention her surname when addressing her. Here we've got the flower pot variant. So next we have shorter versions of somebody's name. Let's say Dimitri. Dimitri's name is Dima. If you're saying, I don't know, Olga. Olga, the softer, nicer way to say Olga is Olya. Next, maybe Anastasia. Anastasia is Nastya. Ksenia is Ksyusha. What else have we got? Trying to think of my mates' names. Roman, Roma. So there's ways that you can address people in a kind of shorter, nicer way, just when you're on more friendly terms. Now, I've said that feminine names end in a or ya, and male names don't, masculine names don't. But when we're shortening a man's name from Dimitri to Dima, it ends in a. Sergei becomes Seryoga. Alexander becomes Sasha. And so, yes, when you're shortening a man's name and making it a more friendly name, it ends in the letter A, which is really confusing because A is a feminine letter, right? So yeah, perhaps it's because we're shortening the name and making it more of a friendly name that for that reason it becomes with a female ending. I don't know. So annoying, right? So over here, look, we've got the well. Can you imagine having to use a well to get water? But typically, even if you know somebody who you need to show respect to, you won't use a shorter version of the name. Even if you have known or met your immigration officer, 150 times, you probably won't use the short name. You probably won't be calling her Nastya instead of Anastasia, or Tanya instead of Tatiana. And there's some names that don't actually sound like a short version of that name. One of those examples is Nastya and Anastasia, or Natasha is the nicer, kinder, softer version of Natalia. Of course, in the West, Natasha and Natalia are two completely different names, and I quite often make mistakes. My younger brother's wife is called Natalie, and I'll often say to her, "Hi Natasha," And she'll be like, my name's not Natasha, it's Natalie. I'm like, oh yeah, sorry. It's just a habit, because you're used to being friendly with somebody, and the nice way to call someone who is Natalie is, of course, is Natasha. This tree's pretty cool, isn't it? It's interesting, we've got like a compound here at the end. So it's a dead end. Look at that balcony up there. I wonder if anyone ever goes and stands on it, eh? So if you want to be kind of, I don't know, even more kind of cute with your friends, then you might want to change their name even further. For example, some girls won't call me Sam, they'll call me Samik. Wow, the person living here does not like throwing things away. But check out the star on the gate. Or let's say that your name is Aliona, if you're a girl, right? Then you might be called Alyonka by some guys, right? That are just trying to be nice to you. It's kind of the way that your mum would maybe speak to you when you're a kid. Like my mum in the UK calls me Sammy. It's just kind of like that. But if you're a guy, you can call the girl with a K at the end, Inka. Or I think the worst one is if you're Tatiana and you call them Tanka. So look, we've got the Soviet flag outside this house. I like the sign that he's put up there, look. Piva, beer, cigarettes and drinks 24 hours. He's obviously got that from somewhere. So the owners of these houses, look, they've created some swans from old tires. In Russia, very rarely does anyone get called Sir. Sir would be Господин, but you know, you'll hear it when it's you know, maybe an awards night or something, they'll say Господин Alexei or something, the greatest musician ever or something like that. But very, very rarely will you ever hear that. You don't have a Mr. and a Mrs. I don't even know if there's a way of saying Mr. and Mrs. Interesting, I've never heard it say. If you're a Russian person, let me know. There is a way of describing a family, or perhaps a husband and wife. Let's say they are Nina and Sergei Anisimov and Anisimova. You would say Anisimovi. So the Anisimovs. So let's just say, yeah, you'd say, are the Anisimovs coming? Or the Anisimovi coming today? Of course, Dammi would be ladies and Госпожа would be madame, but how often do you ever hear that? Only at like an award ceremony would you really hear that, when they'd say ladies and gentlemen. But yeah, it's not something you pretty much will ever use yourself unless you're making some sort of nice speech maybe. This area is very interesting. Just a few random houses with loads of junk everywhere, and then the pink house. Something that's also interesting in Russian is the difference between girl and woman. And typically a woman is a girl, or female I should say, is a girl until she's married, but also until she looks like she's kind of like a mum already. Typically, if you're trying to be nice to anybody, then you're going to want to call them a girl until they look like they're no longer a girl. Even if they're married, right? You're going to call them Devushka. Now, in the UK, like my brother, he finds this weird, because I'll say, I was on the street and I was making interviews with Russian girls, and he'll be like, girls? How old are these people? I'm like, well, they're 20, 30. He's like, well, they're not girls anymore, are they? They're women. In the UK, you'd need to call them women, not girls, because girls is considered something like a girl. It's like a girl and boy, like children. Whereas in Russia, yeah, you know, a woman is someone that's already married, and the word is basically the same as somebody who's married, right? Who has been married. But at the same time, people want to stay and feel young for a long time, don't they? So they'll be appreciative if you call them girls and not women. Even my mates, right? Even my mates' wives who are 50 years old, I'd say, hi girls. I wouldn't say, hi women. It's just nicer to do that. But then obviously there are some occasions when you would want to be respectful and call the woman a woman and not a girl. These are just things you're going to learn when you get here. And it's interesting, there's nothing wrong with being called girl. In fact, it's kind of nice if you're old and you get called girl, you're like, oh, that's nice. Like sometimes I'll get called молодой человек, which is young man. But really, a young man is, you know, мальчик is boy, молодой человек is young man. And then мужчина is man. So typically, if a man is speaking to me, they'll call me мужчина. But then a woman who doesn't know me will probably try and be polite and call me молодой человек instead of мужчина. Now I can go deeper into this and talk about the difference between девушки and девчонки, or мужики or мужчины, but that's just something that you're going to learn when you get here.